America's hidden lifeline is closer than you think. America looks like the ultimate self-sufficient superpower. It has the dollar, the military, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and global influence. But part of that power depends on a neighbor many people barely think about, Canada. And if that relationship breaks, the shock could hit gas prices, grocery bills, factories, energy security, and jobs. Most people think Canada and U.S. relations are just friendship, trade, and a long, quiet border. But U.S. and Canada trade is more like wiring inside a wall, invisible until the power goes out. Energy, food, electricity, critical minerals, auto parts, defense, and supply chain routes connect both countries. That means the Canada and America economy is not a side story. It helps keep America running. By the end, you'll see why Canada is not just America's polite northern neighbor. It is one of America's most important lifelines for energy, manufacturing, resources, and security. Stay until the end because the final question might flip how you think about Canada entirely. Chapter 1. The neighbor America takes for granted. America looks like the most powerful country on earth, but here's the uncomfortable part. A huge piece of that power depends on a country most Americans barely think about. Canada is usually treated like the quiet neighbor upstairs, polite, stable, and predictable. But Canada and U.S. relations are not just about friendship, hockey jokes, or a shared border. They're about gas prices, grocery shelves, factories, electricity, jobs, and national security. The U.S. does not simply trade with Canada the way it trades with a distant country overseas. It leans on Canada for energy, food, minerals, factories, defense, and even electricity. In 2024, U.S. and Canada energy trade was worth about $151 billion, and most of that was American energy imports from Canada. If that flow slows down, the pain doesn't stay in government reports. It can show up at the pump, in food prices, in car production delays, and in the cost of keeping cities powered. Think of it like a giant mansion with bright lights, loud parties, and a massive security gate. From the outside, it looks completely self-sufficient, like it can run forever on its own. But then, you look behind the walls and realize one of the main power lines runs straight through Canada. That is the real story of the Canada and America economy, dependence hidden inside strength. And the risk is that America may not realize how much it needs Canada until something breaks. Chapter 2. Canada fuels America's economy. America talks a lot about energy independence, but here's the catch. One of its most reliable energy lifelines comes from outside the country, not from the Middle East, not from a rival power, but from Canada. It moves through pipelines, power grids, refineries, and border crossings most people never notice. That's why America energy dependence looks very different when the map zooms north. In 2024, Canada exported about 6.3 million barrels of oil equivalent per day in hydrocarbons, and 94.4% of those exports went to the United States. If oil exports slowed, the pressure could hit gas, heating, shipping, and food prices. A supply chain shock starts far away, but it reaches your wallet fast. Think of it like a restaurant that says it makes everything in-house. Then you discover the whole kitchen depends on one trusted supplier. If the trucks stop, the menu shrinks, prices jump, and normal feels fragile. That is how U.S. and Canada trade works in energy, quiet, constant, and easy to ignore. But this dependence gets dangerous when politics, pipelines, climate rules, or border tensions interrupt the flow. Chapter 3. The invisible factory between Canada and America. A car can look fully American and still have Canada built into it. That sounds strange, but it is how modern manufacturing actually works. Engines, steel, aluminum, machinery, and parts cross the border constantly. Some components may move back and forth before the final vehicle ever reaches a dealership. So when people say American manufacturing, Canada is often inside the machine. This matters because U.S. and Canada trade is not just about finished products, it's about a shared supply chain that keeps factories moving and workers paid. According to U.S. trade data, automotive vehicles, parts, and engines are a major category in North American trade. If border delays, tariffs, or political fights disrupt that flow, production can slow fast. That's the tension America doesn't always admit. It wants industrial independence, but many of its factories are deeply tied to Canadian inputs. And that creates a hard question. Can America rebuild manufacturing without pulling apart the system that already keeps it alive? Chapter 4. Canada is America's resource backup plan. America is racing to secure the resources that power the future. Batteries, chips, defense systems, electric vehicles, and clean energy all need materials. Canada's official critical minerals list now includes 34 minerals, including lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, uranium, and rare earth elements. That's where Canada's geopolitical importance becomes impossible to ignore. It's close, stable, resource-rich, and connected to America by roads, railways, ports, and pipelines. Canada has major reserves of critical minerals, plus lumber, agriculture, potash, uranium, and fresh water. It produces roughly 1/3 of the world's potash, which matters for fertilizer and food security. Why should you care? Because fertilizer costs can affect food prices at the grocery store. Uranium can affect energy security, minerals can affect batteries, and lumber can affect housing costs. Canada is not just a neighbor, it's one of America's safest resource lifelines. Think of Canada like the backup generator behind America's house. Most people ignore it while the lights are on, but when the main grid gets shaky, suddenly that backup becomes priceless. As the U.S. worries about China, supply chain risks, and Arctic competition, Canada becomes more strategic. But the risk is that America may start treating Canada less like a partner and more like something it needs to control. Chapter 5. America is powerful, but not alone. America looks independent because it's rich, armed, and globally dominant. It has Wall Street, Silicon Valley, the Pentagon, the dollar, and the world's biggest consumer market. But here's the part people miss. No superpower runs alone. Behind the U.S. economy is a quiet northern partner helping keep the system moving. Canada supplies energy, materials, food, electricity, military depth, and industrial support. This is why Canada and U.S. relations matter far beyond diplomacy. When U.S. and Canada trade works smoothly, most people barely notice it. But if that relationship weakens, the consequences could hit inflation, energy security, and political stability. That's the hidden power inside the Canada and America economy. Think of America like a massive airplane crossing the ocean. The U.S. may be the engine everyone hears, but Canada is part of the fuel system, navigation, and backup power. The plane can still look dominant from the outside while depending on parts nobody talks about. So if America can't live without Canada, that raises a bigger question. Does that make Canada weaker or more powerful than people realize?
This story is not just history, and it is not just geography. Understanding that helps you read the news differently, especially when politicians talk about trade, tariffs, pipelines, or supply chains. The more you understand the connection, the harder it becomes to believe any country is truly independent. Canada and U.S. relations can become stronger, smarter, and more balanced, or more tense, selfish, and fragile. Follow energy data, critical minerals, manufacturing news, and trade disputes, because those are the warning lights. When a supply chain starts shaking, the first signs usually appear before the crisis becomes obvious. So here is the real question. Is Canada just America's quiet neighbor, or one of its greatest strategic advantages? If America depends on Canada this much, does that make Canada vulnerable or more powerful than people realize? And if this relationship ever breaks, who would feel the pain first? Canada, America, or you? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep learning how geopolitics, economics, and power shape your everyday life.